Alright, so let me start with the instances that I have for this project. So I have got 5 instances running. As you can see, this is a portal instance. This instance is running a portal application, and the other 4 are my tenants. So these instances are running my tenant applications. My portal instance doesn't communicate with the tenant instances directly. It communicates with them via load balancer. So I'm using 4 classic load balancers, 1 per each tenant to which portal communicates with. To give you a graphical presentation, let's move over to Visual Ops. So this is my VPC imported to Visual Ops. So as you can see, I'm using 4 classic load balancers, 1 per tenant, and my portal instance communicates with these load balancers. And I also have configured 4 auto scaling groups to which these load balancers are linked to. Alright, to show you that, let's go to AWS console and move to auto scaling groups. So okay, before auto scaling group, let's move to launch configuration. So I have created a launch configuration called Tenant1 auto scale group. So I can actually have given a generic name to it, because this is the same configuration that I will be using for each tenant's auto scaling group, because I'm using the same AMI across different tenants. So yes, so let's move to auto scaling groups. So as you can see, I have got 4 auto scaling groups there. So if you see the configuration for each auto scale group, I have got a desired amount of number of nodes set to 1, and also minimum set to 1 and max set to 3. As you can see that I have configured that auto scale group to auto scale across different availability zones. Now you will see that there is, as you can see, that there is only 1 instance running currently. So if you see, so this particular instance, which is F9AE, if you go to instances, so yeah, so that's my tenant 1 linked to auto scale group for tenant 1. Also, as you can see that this autoscale group is linked to a load balancer named Tenant1 load balancer. Now, if you go to load balancers and Tenant1 load balancer, and if you go to instances, you will see that the same instance is behind that load balancer 1, which is linked to autoscale group for Tenant1. Alright, so if you go to autoscale group again, if you say that I have got a scaling policies linked to each tenant autoscale group, and those are decrease group size and increase group size. So if you see, I have created a new alarms which says that if the CPU utilization becomes less than 40, then you remove 1, and if it increases more than 40%, then you add 1, and that applies to all other scaling groups as well. Alright, so let's go to my RDS configuration for implementing the multi-tenant. So I'm using MySQL as my database of choice. So I have this particular MySQL instance up and running. This instance is using a different security group which exposes port 3306 so that it can be accessed from my portal application, which basically communicates with this database. So I have already connected to this RDS instance from my local via MySQL Workbench. So to implement multi-tenancy of data, I'm using 3 tables mainly. So my first table is tenant table. So tenant table is a table where you store the table information for each tenant. So now, since this is a multi-tenant environment, you need to have a tenant ID column which specifies that what tenant this particular table belongs to. So, and as you can see that this table has a composite key of tenant ID and table name. So now each tenant will have only one table with that particular name. And next table we have is tenant fields. So tenant field is a table where you store what columns does one particular table for that tenant has. So this table basically stores the column information, like what is the column name of the column, which is field name, then what is the type of that column. So and as you can see that since we cannot have same column for one particular table, this table has got a composite key of tenant ID, table name, and field name, which is column name. The next table we have is tenant data. This table stores the data for each table for each tenant. So this table has a composite key of record ID and tenant ID. Record ID is an auto-incremented column, whereas tenant ID is a column that determines that which particular tenant this record belongs to. So I currently have set up all four tenants. So if you go to next tenant table, so I have configured each tenant to have one table named grades. So all the tenants have the tables with the same name called grades. And then we have setup of tenant fields. So if you go and do a select star from tenant fields, so as you can see that the grade table of tenant 1 has these columns: comments, results, student ID, whereas tenant 2 grade table has got only two columns called grade and student name. And then we have, and the same thing applies to tenant 3 and tenant 4. And then we have tenant data table. In this table I currently have few rows for each tenant. So as you can see, these three rows belongs to the tenant 1. So as you can see, the tenant 1 is currently using 3 columns of tenant data table, whereas the remaining 3 columns are having null as its value, since it's only using 3 out of 6. So if we were to add few more tenants which needs to use 6 columns, so it will have the values in all of these columns. And as you see, the tenant 2 is using 2, it has got the remaining 4 columns having value as set to null. Alright, so we can move ahead with the demo of the application. So let's go to EC2 and let's get the IP of the portal. So okay, I will use the DNS name. So since my portal is running on port 3000, I need to put 3000 as port. So now this is my login page. Let's log in. So it has a very simple home page wherein you can switch to different tenants just by clicking on different tab. And as you can see, tenant 3 has a special requirement of providing extra arguments while processing a zip file. I have created a different particular extra attributes for that particular tenant, so you can actually configure the UI as well as per the tenant's requirement. So let's start with testing tenant 1. So for testing purposes, you need to upload a zip file which will have a directory having Java files. So for example, so these are the zip files which I have created by compressing these test cases folder each of those folders has Java files in it. So yeah, so let's start by testing test case 1. So now we are testing this for tenant 1. So now, as you can see, the upload has finished. Now let's start processing. So processing actually triggers a request to the tenant. Now as you can see, tenant has processed that particular zip file and given us back the image. So now you can grade that particular student based on the image that is generated. So let's say the student ID is 9999 and comment you can provide the comments. Wow, done. And you can just state whether the student has passed or failed. Now, yeah, so just to check if that data has been committed to the database, so I have already created a select statement for tenant 1. So as you can see, that I'm querying a tenant data table for tenant 1, and since we had 3 columns for tenant 1, we were using 3 columns for tenant 1, I'm querying only those 3. And since I already know that my column 1 is student ID, whereas my column 2 is comment and my column 3 is for results. So let's trigger a select query. So as you can see that the record that we just made has been inserted to this table. So student ID 9999 and then well10 and result is passed. And then same thing applies to tenant 2. Now let's try with another test case as well. Alright, so there you go. So you can again grade the same student, then same tenant, and done, and let's pass processing. And if you run that select statement again, you'll see that another record has been made. Alright, so let's write and test tenant 2 again with the same test case. So there you go. You can now this tenant has got a grading requirement of having student name and grades to be supplied by the professor. So let's say the name and grade this particular student. And if you go, so I have already created the select statement for table tenant 2 as well. So since tenant 2 has got only 2 columns, which is student name and grade, I am only selecting 2 columns. So there you go. So this is the record that we just inserted for tenant 2. Let's try and test another test case for tenant 2. So you go to tenant 2 and then upload and test case 4 and then process. Alright, so again, let's say this time it's Sushant and grade A plus. And again, just to check if entry has been made. And yeah, there you go. So there is a new record. Alright, so now let's go and test tenant 3. So tenant 3 basically generates a sequence diagram for which you need to provide class name and the function and upload a file like other tenants and then process. So yeah, sequence.save, provide the class name and the function name and click process. There you go. And since you need to provide 2 parameters to grade the tenant 3, provided. So let's say one student number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, marks 10, or sorry 9, and then submit. To check if the record has been made, you make another query to the database, and there you go. So there is another record which has been inserted to tenant data table. And similarly for tenant 4, you upload test case 4 and then process. Alright, let's insert the student email. Alright, let's use mine, and then insert the percentage, and then let's say today's date, and then submit the grades. And there you go. And then let's again check if entry has been made for tenant 4, and there you go. Okay, thank you.